Thanks for tuning in to Meet the Candidates 2018. Today our guest is Jeff Young, Democratic candidate for the 6th District of the U.S. House of Representatives. There are 435 seats in the House of Representatives, and each one of those seats represents about 720,000 people across the United States. Some states have more representatives than others, depending on the population. Kentucky has 6 seats in Congress, and Frankfort and Franklin County sit in the 6th congressional seat. The district itself stretches on the most western part, Frankfort, all the way to the east of Flemingsburg in Fleming County, north to Robertson County, including Lexington, and then down south toward Richmond. So, Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And for those, we appreciate you taking us up on our offer to come do the show. Some folks may not know who Jeff Young is, so if you could maybe just introduce yourself a little bit to our audience and tell us why you're running for U.S. Congress.
My name is Jeff Young. I'm one of the 6 Democrats who have filed to run for U.S. House of Representatives this year. I'm running because my life passion is peace. And I have found that our country is recklessly heading in the direction of war with North Korea, possibly, with Iran, possibly in Syria. We've got troops in Syria. And possibly with Russia, which is another nuclear weapon state, could spell a nuclear war if the government in Washington doesn't come under control of the people. The people do not want war. I do not want war. But our leaders are recklessly hurtling toward war. That's why I'm running.
Okay. So over the course of the last few weeks, and as we taped this show in late March, the president has announced major changes not only to his national security team, but also as Secretary of State. The changes that he's suggested he's going to make, well, he's going to make them. They're not only national security advisor, but also at the CIA and at Secretary of State. Does that change how you feel, or does that about the current situation, or what are your feelings about that?
In 2016, candidate Trump talked about being a more peaceful country in the world. He said maybe a couple hundred times on the campaign trail, wouldn't it be nice if we got along with Russia and China and all these countries? Hillary Clinton, the Democratic nominee who actually stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders during the primary, was more warlike than the Republican, if you can believe that. She wanted to establish a no-fly zone over Syria where Russian forces were operating. If Hillary Clinton had won the election in November 2016, we might be at war today, or we might all be dead. So the problem was not candidate Trump. I think he was actually the lesser evil on Election Day 2016. The problem was a system involving powerful people in both dominant parties that is oriented toward war and geared toward war and wants to maintain the U.S. military empire at all costs. That's the problem. As soon as Donald Trump was sworn in as president, the mass media and the Democratic Party started pressuring him to become more warlike, not to get on better terms with Russia, which we should have done. So President Trump broke all of his campaign promises, appointed a very warlike cabinet, and the recent changes are just slightly worse than before. So his first year, he actually committed aggression against Syria by sending our troops there. We had no right to have troops in Syria, none, contrary to international law. Now, the other candidates running have not said anything about this. You will not find Amy McGrath or Jim Gray or Reggie Thomas saying, all of our troops in Syria must be withdrawn immediately. That's how I differ from the other candidates. It's incredibly dangerous. All this talk about Russia is nonsense. Russia didn't do anything to the United States in 2016, had no effect on our election. So that's the mass media hysteria and the Democratic Party looking for an excuse why they lost the presidency to someone like Donald Trump, a ridiculous character. They've come up with a false explanation that it had to do with Russia. Well, that's false. Russia had nothing to do with it. There's nothing wrong with Russia. Russia is not an aggressive power. Russia believes that the world should be multipolar and not unipolar, with the United States in control of everything. And most of the people in the world agree with Russian President Putin that there should not be one dominant power that has 800 or 900 military bases all over the world trying to dominate countries, that is an unnatural situation and a dangerous situation, and we have to bring it to an end. The U.S. has to wind down our military empire, bring our troops home, so they can defend the United States against invasion, which was the constitutional purpose of our military. Our foreign policy is 180 degrees on the wrong track right now. And we need people in Washington, in addition to Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, who's quite good on the issue of peace. We need more peace representatives in Washington to turn this Titanic around before we hit the iceberg.
I appreciate your views on that. Are there specific issues to the 6th district that you want to work on in addition to the peace initiative that you discussed?
I'm concerned about corruption in the Democratic Party. I ran for this same office, U.S. House of Representatives, in 2014 and 2016. Mm-hmm. I also ran for governor as a Democrat in 2015. My only opponent in the primary was Jack Conway. The Kentucky Democratic Party and Jack Conway's campaign stole that primary illegally. They held a, quote, unity press conference in February of 2015 at which the new chair of the Kentucky Democratic Party, KDP, announced to reporters, Jack Conway is going to be our nominee for governor. Allison Lundergan Grimes is going to be our nominee for Secretary of State. Well, to name someone is to nominate them. The KDP nominated Jack Conway 3.5 months before the 2015 primary in May, and that's illegal. Violates the bylaws of the Democratic Party. Conway refused to debate me even once during the whole primary campaign. When I was in a county debating the 4 Republicans for governor, he was in some other county. He ran a completely unethical campaign, and the KDP backed him up on that. They provided all the party's resources to his campaign and nothing to me. Again, violating both the bylaws and actual law. So I sued them in state courts. They got thrown out, and I sued them again in 2016 in federal court. And that case is now before the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals in Cincinnati. I'm going to get that case reinstated, and I'm going to stamp out corruption in the Democratic Party. Now, in addition to that civil lawsuit that's under appeal in Cincinnati, I had to file a criminal complaint with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney for Eastern Kentucky, U.S. Attorney for Western Kentucky. 67-page criminal complaint, signed and notarized under penalty of perjury, I filed that on February 22nd of this year. So, they're doing it again. They're cheating again this year. The KDP and the Fayette County Democratic Party think it would be fine if Amy McGrath, Jim Gray, or Reggie Thomas were the nominee. They've been helping them, providing resources to them, and actually prohibiting me from walking into the party headquarters. Can you believe that, John? I can't walk into the party headquarters in Lexington or Frankfurt without them calling the police, which they did, and threatened to arrest me if I walk into the meeting. It is impossible, John, for a fair primary to occur when 5 of the candidates can go anywhere they want, and one candidate is prohibited under fear of arrest and jail for walking into the party headquarters to attend a meeting. That criminal, I want them, it's 122 Democrats I have identified, all the voting members of the KDP Executive Committee, all the voting members of the Fayette County Executive Committee. I want them all indicted. I want them tried in a federal court for massive felony election fraud.
I understand your point of view, and you're obviously passionate about some of the trials and tribulations you've had in previous runs and this current one.
Right. Why should anyone ever trust a Democrat if they cheat during the primary process?
This is we have invited any qualified candidate to come on our forum, and you're here, and we don't have anybody here to make you concerned about not being able to state your views. And I think there are probably many people out there that are watching this today that are specifically interested on what you want to do for them in Congress. And so other than the things you just mentioned, are there, let's talk about some things that are in the news right now. Obviously, there'd be quite a bit of information out in the news about some of the things that are happening with guns in our schools and just the access to firearms. Where do you stand on that issue of gun control measures or not gun control measures? What do you think about that? Where do you sit?
Well, the greatest threat to the lives of all of our students and all of our citizens in the 6th District, in Kentucky, in the United States, and worldwide is the threat of a nuclear war. I support the Second Amendment, but the incumbent, Andy Barr, has supported, since he went to Washington in January of 2013, Andy Barr has supported the Second Amendment, free guns, for Al-Qaeda in Syria. He has been supporting Al-Qaeda, along with the U.S. military and the CIA. I don't support the Second Amendment for international terrorists. So if I would advise all of the students who are getting energized behind this safety issue to pay a little bit of attention to foreign policy and the risk of a nuclear war that could kill every person on Earth. Nuclear exchange, radiation, and nuclear winter, which would wipe out agriculture and eliminate the food supply. A nuclear exchange between the U.S. and Russia could kill every person on Earth and other species as well. And so the gun issue, I'm concerned of keeping guns out of the hands of terrorists and reducing our arms sales to terrorist countries such as Saudi Arabia, which is conducting a genocidal war against the people of Yemen.
Well, let me step on another issue here that we've heard a lot about, not only in the United States, but it's specifically in Kentucky, on drug overdoses and opioid abuse. What are your ideas to address this epidemic that's just crushing certain counties around us here in Frankfort and Franklin County and all throughout eastern Kentucky?
It is a serious problem. I would look to what other countries have done about the problem of addictive drugs. I think cannabis, marijuana, should be legal. I think actually that marijuana could be a part of the treatment program against addiction, wean people off addictive drugs. I think that our troops in Afghanistan need to be pulled back home because a lot of them are protecting the supply of poppies and heroin that makes its way to the United States and adds to the drug supply. There's no reason for us to have troops in Afghanistan in 2018, 2019. There's no reason for it. I would look toward countries such as Portugal, which have legalized all drugs. That should be a possible solution. We should look at that. And in general, the war on drugs has failed. It adds violence, it adds fear to what could be treated as a medical problem, treating addiction. Our emphasis since Richard Nixon has been wrong on the drug issue.
So is this an issue you think that needs to happen at the local level or at the county, state level, or do you think it's federal level?
Federal level.
Why?
Well, it's ridiculous to have marijuana legal in some states and illegal in others.
So what would you propose?
And it doesn't lead toward any solution. The same atmosphere of fear and violence still exists. I would propose legalization of cannabis nationwide.
Okay, I appreciate that. Over the course of the last a month or so, the president has made a major move on imposing tariffs on certain items around the world. He has applied the tariff to some countries, but has not to other countries. So I'm curious what your position is on free trade, and do you support the president's tariff plan?
No, I don't support it. It's being implemented incompetently. It's making our allies angry. It is reducing respect for the United States among the other countries of the world. Part of the problem is faulty so-called free trade agreements such as NAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's one thing among the hundreds of things President Trump has done. That's one thing I agree with him about, to cancel the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So tariffs, there's quite a possibility that we'll get in a trade war with China, and that's something that they are very serious about, in addition to other things like their own national security. They're serious about it, and the Trump administration is like a bunch of amateurs playing with matches. They don't know what they're doing.
What kinds of things would you suggest that they change? Because as I've read a lot about the tariff, the tariffs that are being implemented, it could possibly hurt quite a bit of the 6th congressional district.
Right.
First, with we manufacture quite a few vehicles here, and not only that, but the spin-off of the vehicles themselves with wheels and headliners and the headlights and all that kind of thing. But not only that, with the bourbon industry that's right here in central Kentucky, that a lot of folks are saying that these tariffs are really going to hurt those industries. So what type of plan would you have to address those concerns?
I would recommend and try to vote for legislation that would require the United States to operate within the legal frameworks that have already been established. They're going outside of those frameworks, imposing unilateral sanctions and tariffs. A tariff is a form of a sanction. And economic sanctions, for example, against North Korea, Iran, and Russia, a vote that passed the U.S. Congress overwhelmingly last fall, I would have been one of the few representatives that voted against that sanctions bill. Sanctions harm the population of the country. They harm our own manufacturers, our own exporters, and they do not affect the behavior of the government of Iran or North Korea or Russia. Russia actually benefited from U.S.-imposed sanctions because they developed their own industries. If they couldn't buy it from the West, they developed their own agriculture and so on. So sanctions and tariffs, you have to be very careful about them. Sanctions are the worst. Many politicians say, oh, instead of bombing them, we should impose sanctions, for example, against North Korea. Well, that has led to widespread hunger in that country. It's immoral to impose starvation on a country of 25 million people in order to influence the decisions and policies of one leader. It's immoral. We need to be, in North Korea, we need to be backing off. We need to stop performing these war games with South Korea. We need to let the countries in the region solve their own problems. Basically, the United States needs to back off from the situation in North Korea, and the countries in the region will solve it without our so-called help. All we do is add fear and threats. You know, Trump made a threat of the same type of threat that Adolf Hitler made right before World War II. He threatened North Korea, the people of North Korea, with fire and fury. That was outrageous. He should have been impeached for that speech he made to the UN.
Some might argue that the sanctions and that language may have worked if the meeting that has been announced between Trump and North Korea takes place over the course of the next few weeks.
Nope. North Korea has been offering to talk with the United States for decades. And it's been the United States that has been unwilling to talk. And so the sanctions are simply an immoral infliction of pain on the population of North Korea with no upside, with no benefit. They're immoral.
I want to switch gears a little bit if we can. You know, much has been written about over the past few decades of the lack of bipartisanship in Congress. Mm-hmm. And I wondered, what experience do you have that has prepared you for a politically divided Congress?
The problem is not excessive partisanship. The problem is the worst decisions that Congress makes occur when Republicans and Democrats are pretty much on the same side. When the Republicans and Democrats in Congress get together, I fear for my future. I'm talking about that sanctions bill I just talked about, imposing more sanctions against Russia, Iran, and North Korea. 517 of the 535 members of Congress voted for that sanctions bill. 5 voted against it. Bernie Sanders, an independent. Our own Senator Rand Paul voted no. Thomas Massey, our representative from Northern Kentucky, a Republican, voted no. 2 other Republicans. Not a single Democrat voted against that sanctions bill. In my opinion, the 5 who voted against it were right, and the 517 members of Congress who voted for sanctions against those 3 countries were wrong. They were damaging our own economy, making our allies mad, harming the population of North Korea, having no effect on the behavior of Iran. The United States is isolated on the Iran question. And the more sanctions we impose, the stupider we look to the people of the world.
We've only got about a minute left, and so there are some things that maybe we haven't covered, because we've covered a lot of ground today, that you would want to talk directly to our potential voters out there into the camera, and we appreciate you coming on today. Okay, well, thank you. I support single-payer health insurance law for the United States, also known as improved, expanded Medicare for all. When I get to Washington in January of 2019, I will sign on as an additional co-sponsor to House Resolution 676, which is the Expanded Improved Medicare for All Act. It has something like 121 co-sponsors, all of them Democrats. I will happily become another co-sponsor. And, you know, as a minority party, how can we get anything like that passed? Well, I will work to oppose those Democrats who don't sign on to peace and who don't sign on to Expanded Improved Medicare for All, H.R. 676. And I also will not support any of the 3 Democrats who I have named as criminals: election rigging, election stealing, unindicted felons. I will never stop trying to get them indicted. We appreciate you coming on today, Jeff Young, Democratic candidate for the 6th District of the U.S. House of Representatives. Remember to get out there and vote on Tuesday, May 22nd in the primary. And as always, Cable 10 will be live at the county courthouse on election night. So kind of tune in and watch and see what happens. Thanks again for watching.